Representative Zimmerman, thanks for joining us today.
Sure, good to be here.
So I want to start out by talking about this. I have in front of me here House of Representatives daily session update from May 23rd. Okay. And this news has been spread. People are aware of what's going on, and we kind of want to set the record straight here and allow you to speak on this. So before me here it says on May 23rd in the House of Representatives, May 23rd, 2022, it's resolved that Representative David Zimmerman, Lancaster County, resigns as a member of the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, Appropriations Committee, and the Insurance Committee. Mm-hmm. And it lists two other representatives who resigned and one who was elected a member. And then it's respectfully submitted Stan Saylor, Chairman, Committee on Committees. So yes. This got out, and people are wondering, why did David Zimmerman resign from these committees? So did you, in fact, resign from these committees?
No, I did not resign. They basically took me off these committees. And it would have been done by, officially done by Committee on Committees, which is who gets involved in appointing us to committees in the first place.
So why were you removed from these committees then?
Okay, so it was late in the day. What was our date there? The 23rd.
May 23rd.
So it was late in the day, late in session. I was at my seat in the chamber, and the speaker, leaves the rostrum and comes back and asks to see me in the back of the chamber.
Brian Cutler, right?
Speaker Cutler, correct. And so sure. So we went back there, and he says, "I was just handed this, and looks like they're going to be removing you from 3 committees." I said, "Oh." I said, "What's it about?" He says he doesn't know, and I said, "Well, I need to know." He said, "Well, I'll find out for you." And then I said, "Well, who made this decision?" And he says, "Leadership," which obviously he's part of leadership. And 2 minutes later, they're reading it across the desk in the chamber. So that was what transpired late in session on the 23rd.
So you did not resign. I mean, as I understand, resign, the definition is to voluntarily leave a job or other position. So does resign in Harrisburg mean something else? Or why was it presented as a resignation then?
Yeah. That's a question for leadership because I did not resign and had no intentions of resigning.
Okay. So some of the reasons being presented by the media is that you were removed because you did not support the incumbents. Do you think that's an accurate assessment of why you were removed?
No, that's not accurate because there's many incumbents that I was very much in support of, and the interesting thing is, or not interesting, but the way it kind of came down is that this was on a Monday when they took these committee seats away, and it wasn't until after session on Wednesday that I was called to the leader's office or the speaker's office rather, and the leader was also there. So it was Speaker Cutler in Cutler's office. It was Leader Benninghoff, one of his staff, and one of Cutler's staff. And that's when the speaker says, "Well, Dave, the reason that we removed you from these committees is because of not supporting Senator Ahmet, and supporting his opponent," which is also not true. And I can talk more about the opponent to Senator Ahmet as well.
But is it true that you didn't support Senator Ahmet in his campaign, though?
Well, no. I basically was being neutral with most all candidates. Okay. Because of what's going on politically these days. Things are so polarized, and with all these various grassroots groups that have kind of formed and continue to grow and meet on a regular basis, I've been meeting and speaking with many of those. So I chose not to support anybody really for any of these positions, and allow the public to kind of decide that on whether it's an incumbent or somebody running against an incumbent. I did not support any of them.
Okay. So, and that's good for our viewers to know, excuse me, because one of the things being said was that you were supporting Mike Miller, who was running against Senator Ahmet, and you're saying you didn't come out and support him. You may have been at some events that he was at, but
Correct.
You didn't necessarily come out and support him. At the same time, you didn't come out and support Senator Ahmet. You remained neutral as far as the candidates. But even that in of itself seems to be frowned upon by the GOP leadership, that you weren't out there supporting supporting Senator Ahmet.
Right. So correct. And for the record, on Mike Miller running against Ahmet, I did not endorse him. I did not give any funding. I don't know who his campaign committee is. I was at a number of events with him where I was invited by these various groups where I spoke, but I was not officially with him. He was also invited, and I imagine and believe that Senator Ahmet was invited to some of those as well, and most of those he was not at. But so I did not officially support Mike Miller, and it was several weeks before the election that I was actually last with Miller, and that was at a Moms for Liberty event that took place in Ephrata, and they'd asked me to say a few things, which I did, and Mike Miller was at that event as well. But that was several weeks prior to the primary election.
So you set the record right on that. You didn't support Miller, you didn't support Ahmet. I want to read something here this is Shelley Castetter. This is from LNP, a political consultant from Lancaster County who works closely with House Speaker Brian Cutler, it says.
Right.
And she says, in the primary, we are allowed to support anyone we want as long as they are Republican, but it is unusual for anyone, especially a legislator, to support anyone who isn't endorsed by the party. I don't agree with Dave Zimmerman on this, and I was disappointed he decided not to support Ahmet. And I think when someone is endorsed, we should try to support that person. So I was surprised he was very open about it, but he was not the only one. So maybe just a little more on this, because
Sure.
Representative Jones, Mike Jones from York County, he did come out and support, as far as I understand, some of the challengers to the incumbents. They ended up winning, and I think Stan Saylor, defeating Stan Saylor, who is currently still the chair on the Committee of Committees. Is that correct?
Yeah, he would still be chair on Committee on Committees. He's also the chairman of Appropriations, which is one of the powerful leadership position. So,
I mean, it seems to me that you got some sore losers here. I don't know. I mean, Stan Saylor was defeated by a challenger. He's part of the leadership that would be making these decisions on the committee. Even though you didn't support the challengers, you seem to have broken an unwritten rule in the GOP and not supported their guy. And then we have Mike Jones, who went out and did support the challengers because in his mind he believed they were better candidates, apparently. Right. So, I mean, what is this? What's your take on this unwritten rule within the Republican Party?
Yeah, great question, Chris. And do know this, that while I didn't come out and endorse and actually outright support Senator Ahmet as an endorsed candidate by the party, I did not work against him. And I think that's what's kind of being misconstrued in all these articles and so forth that you're seeing. But within the party, yeah, there is this, if there's an endorsed candidate that, we should all be kind of supporting them and so forth. But again, there was a number of, all the House members were up for re-election. So I was not supporting anybody. And I made that decision, and I made it pretty clear early on that I'm not going to be behind anybody. I'm not going to work for anyone, and I'm not going to work against anyone. And I believe I did that. And what's very interesting is in the meeting with the speaker on Wednesday evening on this whole thing, he did make the comment that, well, maybe this is more of a perception that I actually supported Senator Ahmet's opponent. So the question then becomes, how do you justify, some kind of punishment for a perception?
Well, it's a very good question. I think we should address that. And I know this we want to focus on your role here and your experience,
Sure.
But I do just want to bring in the fact that even the idea of Representative Jones in supporting someone else, why can the Republican Party prosper and grow and develop if you have this sort of control from within that really almost prevents any sort of self-regulation as far as getting rid of, if we have representatives that are not serving the people, that are not governing justly, and you have theoretically, representatives who say, I don't agree with this, how can the Republican Party grow and improve if this is kind of the internal mechanism that operates within it?
Yeah, and that's a fair question, and I really believe the Republican Party in Lancaster County and the larger Republican Party really needs to be looking at internally and at themselves on just what they're doing and what's really going on within the party, because you have pretty big divides within the party at this point, but it's because there's not this unity and working together, and what that takes is really leadership to kind of bring the factions together and sit down and communicate. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have is to somehow communicate a bit better with all sides and all individuals, because the idea of these elections is actually to give people choices. And if you do some things within the party that no longer allows for choice, then is it the people's choice or is it not in the end of the day?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are very discouraged by this. I mean, I know that your supporters are people who voted for you, and that's one of the things you've mentioned in the statement you sent to me earlier, was that this removing you from these committees really prevents you from serving those people. Right. Maybe speak to that, but also, and just before, can you just clarify again what the process is to remove someone from a committee? Is it that's solely done within the Committee on Committees? They have the power to remove and appoint people?
So that's you've seen the letter that it came from Committee on Committees, but the way I understand, this was a decision made by leadership, which would include, Stan Saylor, that's the chairman of Committee on Committees, because he's the appropriations chair, so he's part of the leadership team. So you have the speaker, you have the leader, you have the whip, you have others that are within that leadership team. So the Committee on Committees are the ones responsible for appointing individual members to the various committees, and that generally happens just prior to a new session beginning. And a session is 2 years, coincides with our elected terms, right? And so to remove them, this would have been supposedly a leadership decision, but the speaker's the one who spoke to me about it, and there's been individuals out and about saying that it was predominantly his decision. And I'm not going to say that with certainty because they've said it was leadership as a team. But so there's nothing anywhere in rules that talk about removing somebody from a committee. It only talks about the Committee on Committees actually making these appointments. It says nothing about removal.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit, unless there's anything else you want to say on that, but I'm sure we'll swing back around and touch on it again. But, Dave Zimmerman, Mike Jones, one other representative from Luzerne County actually was elected. So it was just you and Mike Jones that were removed, is that correct?
Correct.
So just two.
Yeah.
So moving forward, is there anything you can speak to on what this is going to look like, maybe repercussions from this? You also have the candidates in York County that unseated some of the incumbents. Is this going to cause, I can only imagine it's going to cause more tension between potentially you, Representative Jones, these new representatives coming in, and how will that make it difficult to maybe move the ball forward on certain things?
Right. Yeah, great question, because if there was ever a time we need unity, it's, we're by the end of June, we're required to have a budget, required by law to have a state budget. And if we don't have unity within our Republican caucus in Harrisburg, in the House, it may be difficult to get that budget completed. The other thing is, right here in Lancaster County, we have been, as House members, because there's 7 of us, we have been, and then there's also the 2 senators, but we've been a powerful delegation in Harrisburg because we have worked closely together. And what's going on here, this kind of thing only divides, and it's basically punishment for something political when our work and our job really is to establish policy and put things in place that actually, help business, help individuals, throughout the state. And so to spend all this time in these political areas is just, it's unfortunate, unfair to the masses out and about, the 13 million people across Pennsylvania.
I want to talk a little bit about the Republican Party in general, and this is as kind of a microcosm of the Republican Party. And obviously, right. You've been in office, I think, since 2014. Is that correct? So you've been there for about 8 years roughly, mm-hmm. and you've been with the Republican Party that whole time. And but I do just want to give some critiques and see if you can maybe make some comments on this, and see if we can maybe address some concerns. To be honest, I'm not sure. My confidence has kind of gone down as far as concern the Republican Party for many years now. I know there are some people within the Republican Party that have integrity, that truly care about liberty and want to govern justly, but it seems to me they're few and far between. And you mentioned in the statement you sent me a scripture passage. You mentioned John 8:32, which you said it's on the ceiling in the House chamber, right?
It is.
And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Mm-hmm. And you wrote that I strive to live by the scriptures and endeavor to walk in integrity. And kind of speaking from the fact that, number one, we should be people of truth. And so that's the first thing that concerned me, that if this says Representative David Zimmerman resigned when you didn't, that's not true. And that right there is at least to me and others, would cause us to distrust the leadership of the Republican Party. And when you talk about, Scripture, there's other scriptures that came to mind as I've been thinking about the Republican Party, and I know I said that there's some exceptions and in the party, but as a whole, my impression, and I kind of want you to speak on this and what we see here, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it's a political group of Pharisees. When I look at the Scripture and see this group of Pharisees, this brood of vipers, that they love money, they're whitewashed tombs, they outwardly appear beautiful, but within they're full of dead men's bones. Jesus called the Pharisees hypocrites. And I kind of look at the Republican Party and see, these are a group of people that they're claiming to be conservative, they're claiming to be about small government, yet they continue to spend our state, into debt, and they make everything look nice on the outside. They're for liberty and family, but yet they're often continuing to promote big government and more policies. Mm-hmm. And I think this happening now, especially as people were already kind of concerned with the Republican Party, right, and where they're headed, this happens now, and it's another example to me. Is this a broken party that cannot be reformed? Is there any hope for the Republican Party? If this is what we get from the Republican Party, why should anyone who actually cares about the ideas of conservative principles support this party? Right.
Again, Chris, very concerning of where the party's at without question. After all this took place, I don't know how many emails, how many phone calls, how many texts I received, and people today, they expect us to be working together and working on their behalf. And when this is going on, that's not what we're doing. And all of this is within the Republican Party, because it's not, the Democrats are not involved in this. Of course, they know what's going on, they're watching it and so forth, but this is all Republicans doing this. When you look at the when you look at the York County races, and and my colleague Mike Jones, going public, endorsing the opponents to these incumbents, which is very different from what I've done. But when you just look at that, those both of those lost. And when you consider the Saylor race, which Saylor has been a friend and been, the appropriations chair. I've been on the appropriations committee, and it's the committee that decides how we spend the taxpayer dollars throughout the state. He lost big. That has to be a message. But in addition to that, when you look on the Senate side, Pat Brown is the appropriations chair over in the Senate. Again, a powerful position, and he's been there a long time, and he lost. He lost. People are saying basically enough already. They're concerned how the money's being spent. And by people coming out and voting against the appropriations chair, that's saying something. And I think the Republican Party needs to be looking at that. What are we doing wrong? Why are people not satisfied with that? So I think it's a great question, and one that the party really needs to grapple with.
So it seems that there is, if we want to use this language, there are some threats to the status quo within the GOP. I mean, you mentioned Saylor and Brown being, unseated by the voters.
Right.
Right. So, and again, I mean, that's, as I think back to the Pharisees, I'm just using them as an example. I mean, the one thing that they hated, almost more than anything else, was someone coming in and questioning the status quo, right? Questioning the way they're doing things and what's benefiting them. And I know this is, they're not exactly the same, but it just struck me as I thought about this, that this very much, it seems very clear that this is a group of people, and again, not all of them, but a group of people who are threatened and are trying to shore up their defenses. I'm not sure. I mean, you look at the Ahmet Miller race, which Ahmet won, but it was a huge turnout. I think the highest turnout in that district. And say whatever else you will about it, it definitely showed that people are, a good amount of people are fed up with the incumbents, at least some of them, not all of them. But, if we're going to get the Republican Party, and that's what I don't know, if the Republican Party can reform to the point where it's actually going to be, dismantling the humanistic statist government that we've set up and get back to a just and righteous government, or if it's going to need to be something else. But it seems to me this is sort of a point of, an important point in that process, whatever it's going to go, is how is the party going to respond to the people? And it seems like with this that they're really doubling down on the fact that we don't want any challenge to the status quo.
Right. Well, and again, there may be a piece in here where by punishing several of us, is that all about trying to get the rest of the members to cooperate better and to conform to whatever they're asking? But this thing gets even deeper. Your reference to what took place in Scripture and so forth. William Penn came to Pennsylvania, and his vision was that Pennsylvania is this model for religious freedom, where groups can come and be free. That was his vision, and one of the things that he commented on is that he wants the power to remain with the people, and those that are elected are actually the servants. And I think in part, Chris, we've lost that we are the servants. Instead, it's become about self and self-interests, and I think Scripture warns about that as well when it becomes about ourselves. And so I think we clearly need to get back to where those elected are actually serving those people. And I'll tell you, I work hard at that in our office, and I'm blessed with good Christian men and women in my office that are all about getting answers from government for constituents. Because I believe if we do that, we've done what we're called to do. And when we don't do that, we're not doing what we're called to do. And so my staff does that. And I know there's a number of other reps that do that in your staff. But we have some of these that it's all about self-preservation. It's all about themselves. It's all about controlling others. And therein lies a big problem, because when I'm out about with the people, and I've been at lots of events, and I'm willing to speak to any of these groups, they are very concerned where our nation's heading, because we had all these mandates. They feel like there's this need by government entities to control the masses somehow. And that's not what people want. They're concerned about that, and I think in Harrisburg we're not doing anywhere near enough to push back on this whole idea of control. But when you look at what's happening here, it's the same thing. They're trying to control even with those that are elected by the people. I was duly elected, as were all the other reps.
Right.
So why are they trying to take some of my voice away from my constituents when I was duly elected by them?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I look at it, and I respect your decision not to endorse either one, and I think that's great. I look at what Representative Jones did, and I think that's great too. I know that wasn't what you did, but I think, hey, if you see someone who you believe is a better candidate, who will better preserve liberty and justice, and you can't endorse them because of some unwritten rules within the system, to me that's a fatal flaw within the system. And you mentioned, self-preservation, and again, I just keep going back to this. Jesus said these Pharisees, they look nice, they put on a show, but they're full of greed and self-indulgence. And so many of these politicians, I mean, and that's the perception of the people. And it might not be true every time, but I think it is most of the time that a lot of these, and this just kind of shows it, hey, we were defeated, some of the leadership was defeated. You have other men who maybe were directly opposing, so to speak, or others like you who just didn't toe the line and do what they wanted you to do, basically. And now they're trying to get even or make a statement, and it's concerning.
Well, and the other thing is to be doing all of this politically from within the Capitol, within our legislative offices, so to speak, because there's a lot of language in law about separating the legislative part from the political part. And so here we are spending all this time on what's political, when what the people are asking for is, government here to to put things in place and or get out of the way so that they can be free. And so instead of legislating, we're concentrating on the political piece of it, which I think the party itself needs to be taking a good look at that as well.
How could, obviously we don't want to speculate too much, but I am curious if the GOP leadership continues to kind of have this vendetta, if you will, against you for this, what happens when it comes time for you to be reelected? And theoretically they could not endorse you, right? And is that's a what do you think about that? What do you think might happen? What do you think is a solution for something like that?
Well, on that, the way the party's kind of set up and established, just right here in Lancaster County, there's there's committee people which are also elected, Republican committee people. So let's just take the township that I live in, and based on the size of that township, there's two couples. And the bylaws would say there needs to be 2 male, 2 female. They don't have to be couples, but in my case, there's 2 couples, and so they're elected to basically vet candidates, and they do a lot of that for school boards, for House members, for Senate members, and the likes of that. And so what's also been happening, and I think what has, some individuals in leadership roles within the party here in Lancaster County and all concerned is that there's quite a few of those committee people were turned over this year, this primary season as well. But it goes back to people are done with status quo. Mm-hmm. They're wanting something different. And I think it behooves us to be listening. What are people saying? And the way you learn is to be out and about with the people and hearing what they're saying. And that's what I try and do. And I think with all these committee changes, I think I don't know what happens going forward. But if there's not enough of committee people in the area that I represent that would vote for me, then I'm not going to be endorsed. And there could well be a push by some in the party, to work against me without question. And because there's also these, we do fundraisers because we do need some funds to be in these positions along the way and to run if we're doing any kind of mailers and just to be kind of known by the people out there that we serve. And so who the committee people are makes a lot of difference. And I think it's very possible, Chris, that you'll have them working against me in 2 years. And I'm planning on running, and I'm going to do what I need to, and I believe I'm going to have tremendous support, matter of fact. But there's no question if the party works against me, they have a way to put money behind it and so forth, and they do that. Why is that? Why is that okay?
Right.
Why are we not allowing the people to make these decisions?
Well, I mean, that's just another general concern people have with the party is the incumbents, and you would be an incumbent, but in general, They have a lot of money and resources behind them, and I know more and more people concerned they have, whoever the GOP endorses, a lot of times they're not going to vote for that person because of these things. And I think unless the Republican Party repents and changes course, more and more people, if they care about truth and biblical justice, are going to be more focused on that than what the party says. Yeah. Would you? So you mentioned you'll run again with or without the party's endorsement, and so would you be willing to run as an independent theoretically if that ever came to that? Some people are so married to the Republican Party that, everything, whatever they say is gospel truth. And to me, that is a concern for me because now you've kind of subordinated, your conscience being held hopefully to a higher standard to the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I will say Lancaster County traditionally has been a county that endorsements kind of matter and people respected that. And there's a lot of people that simply vote for whomever's endorsed in the Republican Party. So that's very traditional in Lancaster. But you just go across the river, my understanding is they seldom endorse. They have these elections, but they don't endorse. There's one thing, Chris, I would like to address just a little bit, and that's the whole redistricting and kind of what happened a bit there, if we could.
Yeah, go ahead. We got a few minutes left.
Yeah. So on redistricting, that's done every 10 years. There's a census, and then there's redistricting, and because redistricting in Pennsylvania had western part of the state lost quite a bit of population. So in total, we lost population. But a county like Lancaster County, we actually gained 50,000 people or more. And so what it did, it kind of shifted a lot of our districts kind of east and north. And that's what happened, in my district, for example. But so what happened with me is, I'm pushed east and north. I'm actually going into Berks County a little bit. But in Berks County, they're even more vocal and very concerned about the Republican Party, and they're very concerned about what's happening, and very, very even more concerned about the mandates and the control mechanisms that are being put in place, and so my district's going to be very conservative, and the endorsement process in Lancaster County is not going to include the Berks County piece. It'll only be what's in Lancaster County. So where that ends up, but I think clearly within redistricting, there was the Democrats were somewhat in charge because of by law, it's the two House leaders, Democrat, Republican, two Senate leaders, and then they pick a fifth person to be chairperson. And in this case, if they can't find somebody they all agree with, then it's the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that picks that fifth person, and that's exactly what happened here in Pennsylvania, which was a former chancellor at the University of Pittsburgh, which is very left, and so you basically had three Democrats against two Republicans, and so I believe though that there was quite a few Republican fingerprints on some of the redistricting as well. I think Democrats in the end of the day controlled it, but there was also some individuals that were very involved in drawing these lines that we have today.
To what end? What were they?
Well, if you look at some of the districts and what they've done, it's actually protected an incumbent.
Okay.
And others, they pitted two incumbents against each other. Others, there was just so many things that kind of, that when you look at what all happened, it's very interesting how incumbents were pitted against each other, how others were turned into kind of open seats and the likes of that. So,
well, a lot going on. This is just the latest episode in, I guess, the drama within the GOP, and I've kind of made clear that I though it's unfortunate that has happened, I think there can be some good from it to reveal what's going on in the party, because again, I'm convinced either that the GOP needs to radically reform or it needs to go extinct, and we need men who will govern justly, and if the GOP can't do that and recognize those men, then someone else should. So I appreciate you coming in and talking about this. Is there any final word you want to share on this and moving forward? Anything you want our viewers to know?
Well, again, I am concerned where the party's at, because what was done here, a punishment for perception. If that's what we're doing, there's no one out and about that buys that, and so what it's doing, it's dividing us within the party. It's dividing us as House members. It's dividing the delegation in Lancaster that had worked so well together for so many years. It's just dividing it all, and it's tearing apart the party, and so there's a lot of work to do to heal all of this, and at this point there's nothing being done to heal it.
Well, hopefully it comes out on the other side, better government for the people, based on righteous standards. So, thank you so much for joining us, Representative Zimmerman, and I'm sure we'll be following this closely. So, thanks for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Yep.